we have a top world producer. He produced so many good stuff.
Thank you.
So many good stuff. Think about like the Strokes. I mean, if you were born like in the 90s or before, like for sure you know who the Strokes are. He produced other stuff and other songs for Regina Spektor, Skin, Skunk Anansi. So we are very grateful and very honored to have here. Please welcome Gordon Raphael.
Thank you all. Thank you very much. Thanks, Jack.
So the first things that we would like to talk about, I think, is about like the process with the Strokes. Like for the album, Is This It? Okay. And then also
jumping in at the deep end. I see. Okay.
Yes, exactly. And then there are more questions, but like now, just like about how like you produced. Is This It? Right. And then also the room is on
on fire.
Room on fire, exactly. Like just this.
20 years birthday this year. Yes.
Wow.
Next
like,
month.
I think we can do a round of applause on that. 20 years. Wow. Just realized I'm getting old, like because I was like on 20. It's already 20 years. Okay. Yeah. Perfect.
Okay, so. The first thing that happened is this band came to my studio, The Strokes, and they wanted to make a demo with me. They said, you know, we need a demo because we're playing the clubs where you play for free and we lose all the money on the taxi. If we could go to the next level of clubs, that would be great, but we need a demo for that. So I had a studio in the East Village in New York, and it looked really cool. That's why they came there. They thought, oh, this is a very nice place. There's purple glitter walls, red glitter walls, fake leopard skin baffles. It looked really cool. We had doll lamps, and it was a good place. And so I had at the time one 888, which was a Pro Tools interface that had 8 inputs, and I had 8 microphones and a room where they could play music and a room where I could do the controlling. And in those days, we used what was called eMagic Logic, which was a German software. It was the most amazing software because in the year 1998, when I first learned how to use it, it could do MIDI and audio in the same software, which was revolutionary. Pro Tools wouldn't catch up with that for 20 years. And so you push one window and you're recording MIDI for synthesizer control, and another window and you're recording audio. Wow. It was a huge breakthrough. It was an innovative product. Everything else, you had to open Pro Tools to do audio and then open another program like Cakewalk to do MIDI. And then you had to have a third program that linked the two together. That was like so cumbersome, but Logic had it all. And so we were using this incredible system. It was pretty state-of-the-art because we had Pro Tools cards in the computer, but Logic Audio from Germany was talking to the Pro Tools card. So we had like the best of both worlds.
Very nice.
Okay. So I'm a musician, and I grew up playing in rock bands, playing keyboards, and I also write music and sing. And I had the experience when I was young of saving my money from a job and going into a studio to record some of my best stuff that I'd already recorded at home. Like, I actually learned how to record stuff on a 4-track, so I really wanted to be in control of the production from a very young age, and I learned a lot of tricks, but I thought, if I go to a professional studio and pay $40 an hour with all this money I've saved up, I'm gonna get such a cool, much stronger result, professional result. And when I went in the studio, these older guys that had all this experience, like when I told them my ideas, they basically started talking me out of my ideas right away. Like, I'm just 20 years old and they've been experienced for years. So I said, okay, the first thing I want to do is the snare drum that guy's playing, I want it on 5 channels. Run it through my rat distortion pedal here. I want a big reverb on this channel. I want a small reverb on this channel. And I want the dry signal over here, so that as it's going along, I'll pick if I want a big reverb and a small reverb. And they said, no, that's how you do it at home. Let me show you how to do it. And basically at the end of this thing, I paid my money and it sounded kind of bigger and clearer, but a lot of the magic that I did at home was gone. So when I became a producer many years later for other bands, including the Strokes, I thought it would be a great idea if instead of being that expert guy who knows how it's supposed to be done, what if I was the guy that listened and actually, what do you want to do here? So that was the first thing I did when they walked in, and I set up all the microphones. I said, what is it you're looking for here? And they hit me with a couple riddles right away. Julian looked at me with a faraway look, and he said, well, imagine you're taking a time machine into the future and you discover a band from the past that you really like. I thought, oh my God, okay, yeah, well, is that treble or bass, or like which preamp do I use for I don't know. I didn't get a real picture. But then Fab, the drummer, said, hey, you know what everybody's doing in New York right now in the studios? And I said, yeah. He said, well, that's what we don't want to do. And that gave me a huge clue, because in the year 2000, when I was recording them for the first time, what everybody was doing was Pro Tools was now invading every studio. It was the new way. Tape machines were kind of collecting dust. They took so much maintenance and so much money, and everybody was happy to have computers and Pro Tools finally. And tape machines could do 24 tracks. Unless you were Michael Jackson, you could rent 2 of them and link them together and have 48 tracks. So that was a big deal. Well, Pro Tools could do 60 tracks, and so everybody was busy filling up 60 tracks for every song. They'd have a Bob Clearmountain kick drum sample, an 808 drum, the real kick drum with 2 mics, 4 different tambourines that came in at different parts, backing vocals, and walls of sound. That was the thing in 2000. So I thought, if you want to do something that nobody's doing, I have 8 microphones set up out there. Go play your song all together in that room with your amps and the drums, no baffles, and just make noise, and I'll capture it in a really cool way. And they said, okay. And they went out, and at first they did it with the vocals. That only lasted 1 take. So they played The Modern Age, the song. They did it all together, including the vocals, and they came in, and they heard that sound, and they said, oh yeah, you got it. That's the sound we want. And Julian said, well, I like the sound, but I think I'm going to do the vocals afterwards because I can't hear myself very well and I really want to concentrate. And I thought, that's good, because when you do vocals, I want to use a fat condenser mic and a compressor, and I don't want to have it with all the band bleeding in that one room with you. So I was really grateful that he said that. So the blueprint was basically everybody with 1 mic on their stuff, 3 mics on the drums total.
3 mics.
3 mics, yeah.
Wow, like
a kick,
like
overhead, and a tom or
like
something like that.
Like the Beatles recording.
Not even. I didn't know all about that Glyn Johns technique. I knew that I only had 8 inputs, so I know the kick drum's important. I know if I stick something over the top, I'll get the snare and the tom. And he had a really small kit too. He only had 1 tom, the floor tom, didn't have a rack tom. He didn't have a crash cymbal. He had like a ride cymbal and a hi-hat. So it was a very minimal kit. So 3 mics covered it. And I had learned from my recording in New York that I liked a room mic. I like 1 mic. Instead of working on separating the sound with baffles or putting things in rooms, what if I put a condenser mic right in the middle of all the chaos and try to get it so it doesn't get all cymbals, so put it low or far away. And I use that mic to supplement the direct microphones from the amps, and so it just is a chaos microphone to use a little bit or a lot, depending on how much chaos you want. And that was basically the blueprint for the EP, which became the blueprint for the album, okay?
The EP is like the modern
age EP, which was, as I said, it was made as a demo, and no one could have been more surprised when Rough Trade here in London selected that demo and said, we want to put it out as an album. And when the Strokes told me that, I said, well, you better come in and remix it because we only spent 3 days on that thing. And no, they like it as it is. So that went out.
Because like you cannot find it online, that EP, like you cannot find it on Spotify. Are there any tracks on that EP that they are not in?
No, all 3 songs from that
three
EP got remade again for the album, and they recently put out a box of singles that you can buy as CDs, and I think that EP or part of it is on it. It was Barely Illegal, Last Night, and Modern Age. Different versions that were done in like a day each, so it was 1 day per song.
And that's all. That's how like it always work. So about like the second album, like
Room on Fire.
Room on Fire. Like it's been like the same process, like the process that wins, you do it again.
It was It was a similar process. By the time Room on Fire came out, I was living in London, so I didn't have a New York basement studio anymore. Okay. And they wanted to record in New York. They just loved New York, and they're from New York. And so they said, "Where can we record?" And I had just done Regina Spektor about 8 months earlier in a really great studio. Like my basement studio was cool. We had some Neve preamps, APIs, a Soundcraft Ghost. Nice. We had Audio Technica microphone was our best mic. So it wasn't the greatest gear, but we had some really nice things like the Neve and the Avalon. Well, the studio that I recorded Regina had a giant SSL board, tons of Neve modules, tons of old Neumann microphones, and a giant professional like live room. So it was a much cooler studio that we did Room on Fire in. And yeah, the blueprint was very much like we want to make it sound related to the first album. So I didn't use that many mic, even though I had a huge capability, I still used only like 1 mic per cabinet. And I probably used a regular complement of mics on the drums instead of 3, probably put 1 on everything. Now I put like 3 snare mics and 2 kick mics. I do. I mean, can't live without that third snare, not mic. Snare
miking on purpose. Like.
Yeah. Well, not even on purpose. Just like I know what each one does.
Yeah.
That center snare mic coming over the kick drum, which my friend in Berlin calls the Wurst, which means sausage. Because in Germany, they think every meal is better with a sausage, and every snare sounds better with that third mic coming over the kick drum that gets some of the kick drum, some of the snare, and some of the tom. It's like a magic mic.
How do you deal then, like with the signal pressure, like that is coming, like you just like to?
I think some people worry when you use lots of microphones about phasing.
Exactly.
But if you have ears and you have a snare mic and you go tap, 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 sounds like a snare, open the bottom mic and suddenly you're putting 2 mics on, and if the sound gets smaller and disappears and suddenly sounds like, if I can say the word online, shit, then you know, oh, something's wrong. I better move the mic or flip the phase. It's very obvious when phase comes in because the sound doesn't get better, it gets worse. So for me, I don't have an issue with it because I use my ears and I want that tom to sound gigantic. It's not. I better do something, right?
If I can ask, I don't know if I'm the only one who want to know this, which kind of microphone and which process like you use for Julian? You used for...
Okay, and that was a whole another process that happened during the EP, the demo, which was, okay, it came time for singing. And we already had, the band was very happy with that 8 microphones live, no overdubs, no reverb, no effects, just like really what you got was what they played. And so it came time for vocals, and I said, "Hey, Julian, what do you want to sound like?" He goes, "I don't know, just like, show me something." So I thought, okay, this is going to be really cool. I had been listening for like all the 90s when I was living in Seattle and the grunge scene was going on, but I was listening to industrial music. Hi. And my favorite band was Skinny Puppy. They're from Vancouver, Canada, which was near Seattle. And they used synthesizers and drum machines, but they did it in a way that was not like Pink Floyd or Kraftwerk or anything. They put heavy distortion on everything and it sounded aggressive. So the synthesizers weren't peaceful, spacey. They were like in your face, like weapons, okay? And they had a process that they called, I'll say it again, it was called the shitalizer that they used for the vocals. It was a bunch of distortion and delays, and it was really like sounded like nuclear devastation. Okay,
but not in parallel, just like in daisy chain.
right, just like straight through, just noise on the vocals. And I thought, how cool would it be to have this rock band with that vocal sound? So I took my Avalon preamp and I put it onto 10, which was like frying out a Marshall sound for the vocals. And he sang the song, sang The Modern Age, and he came in and heard, I said, check this out, Julian. And I played him what I got, and he said, that is really ugly. I hate it. Oh, shoot. Failed. And he said, this is the second riddle from him. He goes, well, you know how your favorite jeans, like they don't have holes in them, but they're not new? I go, oh, Jesus, riddle number 2. What does that actually mean? But then it hit me like, okay, so what if instead of 10, I kind of dial it back so it's kind of worn a bit, but not broken? And okay, so I try 4. And he goes and sings the song again. And he comes in and everybody loves it. Everybody like took 2 tries to find that sound. So, and that stayed with on the EP, the album, first album, and the second album, the same kind of tone, same machine, the Avalon, and an Audio-Technica microphone. Yeah.
What? Who told like I was just like an Audio-Technica microphone? Everyone like images like, you know, thousands of pounds of microphones, and then it's actually like an Audio-Technica.
It's an it's like a $400 microphone, but it was really cool. It sounded good.
We discuss in class a lot, like with students, about like having like the best microphone. Do I need to spend that much money? And that's basically like the answer. No, you don't need to spend like thousands of pounds.
Equipment is all down. Just like recording technique, just like songwriting, it's all down to the intention of what are you trying to communicate. If you're trying to communicate that you were really poor and destitute and lonely and upset, you don't need a super clean microphone and a pristine signal path. You know, you could practically sing it into your phone and it's going to sound kind of cool. It really depends on what the mood is and the character.
Absolutely. I would like to talk about also about the discovering of Regina Spektor, and then the Soviet Kitsch album.
Has anybody here heard Soviet Kitsch by Regina Spektor? 1. It's worth hearing, definitely. 2. Okay. So after I recorded Is This It? And when I was living in London, every band in London that year in 2002 loved the Strokes album, so I got lots of work. I was just in studio, and it was great because in my basement studio in New York, I was the only guy doing all the engineering, all the producing, and it was a bit, you know, like me and the band. Well, in all these big London studios, they had a guy engineering for me and another guy running up to me every 10 seconds going like, would you like a cup of tea? I go, oh, this is great. It was like such a great experience. And I was going to go back to New York around Christmas. So I've been in London for 1 year, recorded maybe 20 bands. And I was going to go to New York just to party. I wanted to go for a Christmas and New Year's party and just cut loose and get rid of work and just like see my friends. And a friend of mine called me up and said, hey, when are you coming to New York again? I said, I happen to be going like in 3 days. He goes, great. I've met this great musician, and would you like to record? I said, oh, no, I don't want to record. I've just recorded the greatest bands, and I've had a fantastic year. I do not want to record. And he goes, well, she's a 23-year-old Russian girl who plays the piano really well. I go, 23-year-old Russian girl who plays the piano. Well, I'll meet her. I told him, I'll meet her. I'll see what she does, but I'm not recording. So I go to New York, and the second day I'm there, we go to TMF Studios, the first time I've ever stepped into this building. And this girl, Regina, comes up, and she's really charming. She's got these big frizzy hair and these old sweaters with holes in them and a necktie. And I'm thinking, wow, who's this? And I say, well, what do you do? And she says, would you like to see what I do? Yeah. So she reaches into her purse and pulls out a drumstick. Okay. And she sits down at an upright piano And she starts playing the upright piano with her left hand and hitting a chair with a drumstick really fast, like horses galloping, with her right hand. And she starts looking up at me and singing the most incredible lyrics I could ever imagine, while I'm already fascinated by this classical Beethoven technique in the left hand and this crazy fast drumming on the right hand. And now she's looking me right in the eye, singing a song called Poor Little Rich Boy, which sounded like the Moldy Peaches meets Patti Smith, some strange thing coming out of her mouth, right? And while she was singing this and playing me the song, the first thing that crossed my mind is, oh my God, the world is going to love this, which happens to be the title of my book, because that's exactly where I got it. I said, oh my God, the world is going to love this. I have to record it. And I started thinking right away in the first song how I wanted to record it. And when she was finished, she smiled. And I told my friend, is the studio actually available today? He goes, yeah. And I said, well, go bring me 9 microphones. And he goes, 9 microphones? Why do you need 9 microphones? It's a girl playing the piano and hitting a chair. I said, watch. And I set up like stereo mics on the piano, a microphone in the room to capture it, a microphone on the drums. And then I said, put a microphone like in the air, another one, and run it down the hall into a Fender amplifier, and then put 2 microphones on front of that. I don't know if that's 9, but I actually did use 9 mics. And so we had this piano in a room with the room sound with her vocals. She's doing the vocal. Oh yeah, a vocal mic, a really good one, like a U67.
Wow, a vintage one.
And she's playing and singing and hitting the chair all at the same time while that sound is being fed into a guitar amp with a little reverb on it, microphone mic'd up by 2 mics, and this crazy sound. Because I thought, she's so good and her songs are so unusual that why would you want to record it like every other girl playing the piano and singing, like just here it is, you know that sound. I thought, what if we record it in a totally non-typical way, like a punk rock album, like a punk rock band sound coming from a piano and a voice. And that's basically what we did.
How did you record like the violin, the strings, like of us?
We did that in London, actually. Because late after we did these songs with her, I was just kind of in love with her music. Like I kept calling her. I was in Seattle for a while during Christmas vacation as well, and I kept saying, "Oh, Regina, I really had fun recording you." And she goes, "Me too. We should do it again." I go, "Yeah, yeah." So when I got back to London, I had a bunch of money because it was like really early in the Strokes royalties. And I was like, I'll fly you out to London. I'll rent studios and we'll do all this. And 2 songs, she said, I want to have a string quartet. And so we were working in the Garden Studios, which was in Shoreditch. And it was run by this guy, Matt Johnson, from the band The. And it was a great studio, fantastic studio. I recorded lots of bands there in 2002 and 2003. And where do I get a string quartet? We don't know. So I'm asking around, and somebody said, hey, there's this one string quartet that Prince used. And I said, well, it's good enough for Prince. It's good enough for me. So we had this string quartet. It was going to cost us £1,000 for a day with 4 people doing 2 songs, okay? And they come in, and Regina's sitting at the piano, and she's showing them parts she wants them to play. And I've got microphones set up, and I'm listening from the control room, and I'm thinking, they're out of tune. Like, this does not sound good at all. Hello, thank you. And so I'm listening to the string quartet, learning their parts, and I'm just, I'm not a string player, I'm not an orchestra musician, but I can hear when things are out of tune. It just sounded like squeaky and weird, and I'm thinking, well, maybe they just haven't tuned up yet. So as they go along, they learn the parts, and we do a take, and it didn't get better. It just sounded out of tune. And so I was getting angry. I'm thinking, this is our budget, this is our time, I got the studio, and it's not cool. I was getting really mad. And so finally I had an idea, and I said, okay, let's do one more take. And we did the take, and I said, come in here. And I soloed the violin. I said, out of tune, I can't use it. Soloed the viola, out of tune, I can't use it. The second violin, out of tune, I can't use it. The cello, Oh, that's great. Sounds good. So I said, I'm sorry, guys, but I'm gonna have to let you go because I just can't use this. I need to find some other musicians. And the lady said, like, oh, that's okay, but are we still getting paid? And I said, yes, but I didn't pay them.
Oh, all right.
And I talked to the cellist. I said, like, what's up with this? He said, I'm actually part of another quartet that's very good. And I said, I believe you because you play real well. His name's Merlin. And he brought in another string quartet the next day, and they learned the parts, and they did phenomenally well. And that's what you hear on the album, on the song Us, and one other one, not Chemo Limo, Carbon Monoxide. Yeah, those two songs have beautiful string quartets on them.
Yeah, I asked because he really has like a very beautiful quartet strong and it's very recorded like very beautifully. Talking about recording session, I know that there's been like a particular recording session with Albarn.
Damon Albarn
from
Gorillaz.
Blur.
Yeah, from
Blur and Gorillaz.
Right.
And then I know that something happened during that recording session. Like you happened to you deleted everything about.
Well, this is the comedy part of my book. We were recording Room on Fire, and it was in New York City at TMF Studios. And in summer of 2003, Blur was having a reunion concert at Madison Square Garden. And that night, the Strokes all wanted to go see Blur because they're big fans. And I didn't go. I wasn't a big fan, and I just wanted to work on editing and doing stuff in the studio while they were gone, take advantage of the downtime. Well, around maybe midnight or 12:30, I hear a bunch of voices coming down the hall, and it's the Strokes, and they've brought back Damon Albarn to the studio. And I'm thinking, okay, well, I want to meet him, I wonder what he's like. And they'd all been drinking, and some more than others. And so Damon Albarn sat right next to me and was introduced by the band. This is Damon from Blur. I go, hello, nice to meet you. We're in a couch. We're on a little couch, and he's sitting right next to me. And I say, nice to meet you. And he looks at me and he said, David Bowie calls me every single day on my phone. I thought, this is weird. I love David Bowie. I'm kind of impressed, but I thought that's a weird way to say hello. Like, this is he's got to show off to me. I'm just like a producer, I'm not even that famous, and he's telling me that. So I didn't think much of it, but I didn't like the way he said it. And when he noticed he didn't get a rise out of me, he said, I'm actually one of the only singers who can do all the Beatles harmonies. Yes, I know all the harmonies. And again, I thought, just Jesus Christ, the one-liners. It's kind of, what's he on an ego trip trying to win my approval? I just got a bad feeling. And yeah, he was probably drunk, but this is what was coming out of his mouth. And so the Strokes told me, hey, we want to play the new songs we're working on to Damon. And I thought, okay, whatever. And I started playing him some songs, and the Strokes were watching his face and watching his reaction. And when a couple songs finished, they said, so what do you think, Damon? And he goes, oh, yeah, I see what you mean. You're going to have a real hard time selling this, aren't you? And all their faces just fell down they got so depressed. All their fears were confirmed now by Damon, the album wasn't good and it was going to be hard to sell. And it was just a moment. I'm thinking, this guy, get him out of here. This is not true. These songs sound brilliant. They sounded exactly like they do if you know that album, Room on Fire. There was no difference. It was just they hadn't been mixed yet. And so the next thing, they talk amongst themselves, and Damon thinks it would be a good idea if he sang some backing vocals and harmonies on some of these songs. I thought, they don't ever use backing vocals. They don't even have a tambourine or reverb. It's this is a band that is just so in your face and so direct. I just thought it was a horrible idea, but they're my boss, So if they want to hear backing vocals, I set up a mic for Damon. And he went out there in his state, and he started improvising harmonies to Stroke songs. And from the very first note, it's it was off. It wasn't cool. It wasn't in tune. It wasn't proper. I just felt that right away. But he wanted to try another idea and another idea. And every time he wanted to try another idea, I muted the old idea so he could try something fresh, right? So at the end, he's kind of, after about an hour of singing all these parts and me muting them and recording them, he said, I don't think this is really working. And I thought, yes, you're right. I didn't say it. I just felt relieved that he said it and I didn't have to say it. And then he came in the control room and Julian said, well, Gordon, would you play back some of that? And I had a very evil idea. This is vengeful, evil Gordon at his finest. I said, oh, you want to hear that back? And I opened all 10 or 12 ideas that were all out of tune individually and nothing to do with each other. I said, okay, check this out. And I pressed play and out came this cacophonous bad sound. And everybody was like, oh, yeah. No, that's not working. And I said, may I please delete those? Yes. And that was the end. There's one more part of the story, which was it's now 3 a.m. And Damon's tour manager was like, Damon, we've got to go back to the tour bus now at Madison Square Garden. We've got to get to Boston. It's a long drive. He goes, no, I want to party with the Strokes some more. I want to stay here. No, Damon, please come. Please come. And so that was the last I saw of him. He was being kind of led out, protesting that he wanted to stay and party. Thanks for asking.
No,
it is the comedy part of my book, actually.
And I know that you've been using a synthesizer. Oh, yes. Okay, so we use synthesizers here at the school. Yes. And there is in particular one synthesizer that I know that you like is the ARP Odyssey.
That's the one. That's my baby, right.
Did the homework. Yeah. So, and then I want to ask you the relationship that you have with that synthesizers. Yeah. How you make it work? What's the process that you have that you have with that synthesizer?
I was very early in using synthesizers. They weren't even a popular thing. They were very hard to find. They were kind of brand new, just starting to be used in music. And that was the time I was in school, and they had an ARP Odyssey there. And I wound up joining a band, and they asked me to buy an ARP Odyssey. And at first, it was very hard. It has about 30 sliders and about 20 switches and no memories. So every time you made a sound, you had to make it from scratch. And then if you wanted to get it back, you had to kind of remember kind of what it was like, but you'd never get it back exactly. So you really had to learn the thing. And at first I had these paper layouts. I'd be on stage playing my electric piano with one hand and then putting the paper layout on the ARP Odyssey and pushing the knobs to where the little cross marks were. It was very cumbersome. I wasn't good at it, and I couldn't make good sounds. It was very complicated, but I knew I wanted to get involved in synthesizers.
Happens a lot when you use ARP, with ARP, the 2600,
even complicated.
even more complicated when you start and it's okay, I don't know how to use this.
Yeah. So at some point, there's a story behind it, but I don't want to go into it. At some point, I started really getting the hang of this synthesizer to the point where I could make it do any sound I wanted in my imagination. I could make that happen very quickly, and I could impress people. And the thing with having 30 sliders and 20 switches is you can morph. If you put your 2 hands on it, you can morph from one sound to another. So you start off with a whale singing in the water, and then wind, and then rockets, and then robots, and then crazy explosion. You can just morph it as it's going, and you can do these fluid tone paintings from one thing to the other, especially when you combine it with echo machines and phase shifters and things like that, which I did. One of the early experiments I did is I got a sound that was halfway between a mouse and a bird. And I had a cat and a stereo speakers in my parents' living room. And I would make this little mouse bird appear on the right speaker, and the cat would go over and claw at the grill cloth. And then I'd pan it over to the left, and I'd watch the cat walk across the room to get that thing. So, yeah, I love that synthesizer. It's still my favorite one of all because it makes an infinite amount of sounds. A Mini Moog has 3 oscillators, but you can make bass sounds, melody, and wind. That's all you can do with it. with this ARP Odyssey, it's got the ring modulator and a sample and hold filter thing, so you can make it do an infinite number of creative sounds.
Which version do you have? Like the Mark 1, 2, the 3?
It was the Mark 1 was a white face. I had one of those recently, but the first one I bought was Mark 2, the
Mark
black
2.
face with the gold painting on it. Had a circular pitch wheel, not the PPG. They also make a very good plug-in of it, very cheap, called Oddity by GeForce, and it does like 98% of all the cool things the ARP Odyssey does. You can't put your hands on all the faders, all the little knobs at the same time, but you can, if you know what you're doing, you can find all those sounds in it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, the ARP Odyssey is really, really good. Like, to give you some context, is Doctor Who theme, or like the Stranger Things theme. Like, it's
cool.
It
still exists.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Like,
Korg reissued it. I think Behringer's reissued it. You can find them at not too bad prices right now.
Yeah, exactly. Another question regards like the tour with the Libertines.
Tour with the Libertines.
Libertines.
Yes, I remember them.
Yeah, I think I know that has been a bit like tumultuous. Like, it's been a bit like particular. How come?
Well, it was tumultuous when I toured with them. It was their very first UK tour, but nothing like what happened afterwards. You know, like later it became, you know, television material, news material. You know, it wasn't that bad. It was just like crazy guys having too much fun on the road the first time. We did a tour with the Strokes and the Vines, playing really cool gigs all over the UK. Yeah. And it was my first time traveling from city to city. I saw Brighton for the first time, all these places, Nottingham. We played in London a couple times. And it was a really beautiful tour, and they were so exciting. I thought they were a brilliant band. They had great vocal harmonies. Gary's drumming was completely different than Fab's. Like, he was crazy what he was doing on the drums. So I really loved that band, and I had a great time on the tour. It just felt like when I moved to London and got on that tour, I landed in the right spot.
Nice. Like, I mean, Libertines they sounds like great. If you haven't if you haven't checked them out, like, go listen to them. They were on the best, I think, like, band in the new garage revival in the
and also they have a brand new album about to come out. It's very good. I heard some of it recently.
Very good. And then another question is about like the Seattle grunge scene in the 90s.
Yes, yeah.
Like where you played with the Skies Cries Mary, the band.
Right.
I know that Dave Grohl mentioned it, that it was like the best band in Seattle.
I was very happy when Dave Grohl said that he loved our band Sky Cries Mary. Yeah. And that was... You know, Seattle basically was a fishing village on the West Coast. Then they had Boeing airplanes, and a lot of our parents worked at Boeing Airplane Company. And it wasn't a music town, that's for sure. But there were a lot of the children were making strange music in the basements because it rains all the time, very similar to UK. So everybody either had the choice to go crazy or start bands and learn music in their basements. And so there was always a lot of great music. And for this one time window, starting from about 1988 or so, the grunge scene exploded and bands started getting signed on record label deals and touring and making records. And that's where we got Mudhoney and Tad, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, Nirvana, and lots of great bands all at the same time from our town. It was a wonderful time to be there, really party central.
What about like speaking about, like you said, like that it was like UK, especially in terms of like the weather. We know that you recently moved to UK. I mean, not recently, but you moved to the UK
pretty recently. I lived in London in the early 2000s, but then I spent the last 15 years in Berlin. And recently I came back and I'm living in West Yorkshire in Hebden Bridge. Yeah. So I've been there for 4 years, and I'm very happy to be back in England. That's for sure.
Like, what do you like? What do you like most? Like
What do I most
UK,
like about it?
Berlin, UK, and then US. Like
Right now, I'm liking UK.
UK.
For a while, I didn't like it. Right after my glory time in the early 2000s, like the music scene seemed to get very commercial. Like that sound we kind of invented with the Strokes got co-opted into very hit-making, radio-friendly songs where they're wearing tight jeans and Converse shoes, but the music was kind of boring and commercial. It's the best way I could. It didn't have a lot of angst and a lot of power to it anymore. So I said, I'm leaving. I'm going to Berlin, the Wild West. I'm going to see what's happening there. But now there's so many new bands happening in the US and the UK. But I work in Leeds and Manchester a lot, and there's incredible bands up there. And yeah, I'm very happy to be back here.
Like speaking about like bands, like contemporary like bands, is there any bands or like any music project that you like, particularly
Yes. There's a brand new band out of Leeds, UK called Counting Sevens. And they just released a single that I made with them. They released it on Friday, and it is so damn good. It sounds like the music I heard in the 70s on hard rock radio, like hard rock American style 70s, but done now as if it had never been done before. Like the energy is unbelievable. And then there's a really cool band out of Leeds also called Prima Star Power. And then a band from Manchester called the Zangwills. And all these bands I worked with, and they have singles out on Spotify, and love them.
Nice. Are you speaking like about also like the future? And are you? We know that you released the book. The world is gonna love this. Can you like explain like how come like you wrote this book in the UK? Like
I wrote the book in UK. Well, it was very simple. I always wanted to write a book because wherever I go to record bands, they always ask like, how did you get this stroke sound? Or what was it like working with Julian Casablancas? And I thought, I've been telling these stories so many times, I should just write them down and get them out of my way, and everybody could find out. And of course, I was never going to write that book because I don't like to sit down. I don't like to spend time by myself. I like to walk around in the city, go to coffee shops, go to gigs, hang out in studios. But then in 2020, we had a little pandemic, and I had to stay home. And I was going to go crazy if I didn't do something. And I didn't feel like writing songs because I've already written 1,000 songs. I thought, what am I going to do? And this little voice said, remember that book? The book, it's time for the book. So yeah, I got out my laptop and I started writing this book, and I was really happy about it. It came out very easily. It took about 3 months to write the book and took about a year to edit. It was much harder editing, but the stories were just like, I knew what happened when, and I used this great website called setlist.io. So if I couldn't remember, did I go to that concert first or did that happen first? I could go to setlist.io, and they have every band, every concert on the tour and what they played. So I could always fact check to make sure I got the order right of my own story.
That's good.
Yeah, very cool.
Very cool. I think that was it. Like about the question. If there is, if we have like any question from the audience,
the crew. Does anybody want to know something? Hello.
Please. Yeah.
Yeah. How did you go from recording at home and wanting to take control of sessions but not being allowed to having your own studio? Like, how did you get your first gigs ever?
Okay. So I learned to record because all my life I was always in bands with these expert guys, even if they were my age. Like when I was 13, my first bandmate was also 13, but he could play everything by Hendrix, and Hendrix was still alive at that time. So I'm like always worked with these mad geniuses, and they were always really mean and bossy and telling me like, you blew the fourth measure, or you didn't hit the G sharp, or you hit I was always getting these experts telling me stuff was going wrong. Well, I knew I wanted to write songs and I wanted to sing and play guitar and do all these things, but I knew I could never do it if somebody was watching me. If somebody was saying like, that's a stupid lyric. Why are you talking about that? Like, why are you talking about ancient Atlantis in a rock and roll song? Like I didn't want any comments. So I learned how to record so I could do my own songs, all right? And basically, it never occurred to me I wanted to record somebody else because I thought my ideas are the ones I'm interested in. I don't want to hear somebody else's songs. And when I lived in New York in the year 98, actually, I lost like all my money from Seattle from the grunge time went down very quickly. The cost of living was astronomical compared to Seattle. And so suddenly I was like, oh my God, I'm about to go broke. Am I going to work at a supermarket? What am I going to do? And someone said, hey, we heard you know how to record stuff. Would you record our band? I go, yeah, I guess so. You have to pay me. Yeah, okay, we'll do that. And so I recorded one person, and their drummer liked the drum sounds I got, and they told his other band. And pretty soon, within a few months, I was actually had people coming down to my little studio every day recording something for either 3 hours or 1 hour or a whole day. And suddenly I had a job. And so it literally happened. I didn't expect it. I didn't really want it, but I dig it. You know, I like it now. And I learned a lot hearing where other people wanted their tambourines put or their backing. It helped me with my own music immensely to work with other people.
What advice would you give to producers who are recording their first album for a band or for themselves?
Well, if they're recording for a band or if they're doing something like making an album, they must already have some confidence and experience and knowledge. So that's a great place to be. It's like when you're starting out and you don't know how to use a microphone and you don't know how to use software, that's really difficult. It is a huge learning curve there. So I think there's two very important aspects. There's a great breakthrough that happens when you trust your own ears. Like when you think this is a good sound, you know, and you've arrived at that point, that's a great place to be. So this kind of confidence that when you think it's good, it's good. That's one part of the equation. The other part is you're working with other people. And so even though you might think this is a good guitar solo tone, they might tell you, actually, that is a terrible sound. We want it to sound cheap and ugly and coming from outer space. And it's your job, I think, to make them happy so that they will tell their friends that you are a great producer. So it's kind of a balance between trusting your ears and knowing when a kick drum sounds like a kick drum and you like it. And many times they will agree with you. They'll say like, oh yeah, that drum sounds awesome. Let's play the song now. So that's good. But there are times when you have to really find out what the person wants and listen to them very carefully, even though it might not be your choice. You have to kind of give them their color and their flavor for the song. So I think those two things are very important to develop independently and together. Welcome. Hello.
Yes.
How do you think your like songwriting is like developed over time? Do you think this like still comes from the same place, or if not, how have you kind of redirected that?
How has songwriting changed over time?
How is like your songwriting?
My songwriting. Oh yeah. That's a very well. When I first started songwriting, I had come just from classical piano, so I was listening to Bartók piano concertos and concertos for orchestra, and handily enough, there's progressive rock everywhere, like Keith Emerson and Yes, and you know all this stuff like that. So I thought you basically had to be a master. Just like for guitar, you basically had to be Jimmy Page. For keyboards, you had to be Keith Emerson. It was very difficult, and I was trying to write extremely complicated things with lots of polyrhythms and parts that change and texture changes and crazy lyrics. And then the next thing that happened in 1977, suddenly the Sex Pistols come along and the Ramones and Patti Smith, and they put all those people out of business. Like that is the most uncool thing in the world. In fact, if you have more than 2 chords, it's suspicious and you better yell and wear, you know, like it's so crazy. So when I saw the Ramones for the first time, I thought, I could do that. Wow, I know how to play the guitar like that. I could write songs like that. And look, the people are loving it. You know, you don't have to do all that insane Jimmy Page stuff. You could just play these chords like that. And if you have the right attitude and the right stance, people are going to listen and like it. So that was extremely liberating, that I'm ready now. And I started my first bands and I went on stage, and it was great. And so that was one of the biggest liberating factors that started a change. And now I think one thing is that I thought for a long time I have my own sound and a certain style, and there's certain things I do. Well, recently I let that go, and I just thought, if I want to do a weird hip-hop song like De La Soul with poetry on it, I can do it. If I want to do a hard rock song, I can do it. If I want to do psychedelic stuff, I can do it. I just kind of let myself loose. Piano ballads, go back to progressive rock, write some complicated stuff. So I think I feel more liberated and free to do just about anything. And also we live in a time where instead of a dominant style, like there's like every style and every sound in history is being listened to. Like if you see how many people are listening to Led Zeppelin right now on a daily basis, how many people are listening to jazz, and all that stuff. So I think it's a great time to be very eclectic and just do what you feel instead of what you think is, needed to sell or be popular. Okay?
That's a great advice.
Thanks.
Hi, when you're working with a band and they're kind of producing something from scratch, in terms of producing, zooming out, in terms of like managing everybody, how do you do that? How do you keep people focused?
Great question. It starts with, like, if they contact me, for example, and say, hey, we want to work with you. Well, I say, like, show me something that you've done. And I might listen to it and I go, oh yeah, that's really cool. I like it. It's got a great sound to it. And then the next thing is like, okay, I'm willing to work with you. And what do you have in mind? And they say, well, we want to do what we just did, but the producer kind of overproduced that, and we want to sound a little bit more like our friends say we sound on stage. I have a discussion. So it starts with a discussion, like where are we, just like with the Strokes I told you earlier, like where are we going? What do you have in your mind? Oh, can you all stand in the same room and play the song like together? Or do you need to do it one at a time with a click track and then spend a week editing each thing? Like, what do you want to do here? Find out so even before we go in the studio, everybody knows what's going to happen. I know what microphones to tell the studio to put out. So a lot happens in those preliminary discussions where they know, because they know I understand and I know what they want, and I know what they want. So it works both ways. They're very confident when they go in because we've had this discussion. It's not like they're going to meet me and the same day they meet me, we have to figure out what we're doing and take studio time for that. It's all done ahead of time so that the very first moments in the studio are fun and making sounds, and pretty soon music is happening. Hello.
Right. Was Soviet Kitchen a new record you did with Regina then?
It is the only record I did with Regina. I wish I would have done her next one as well, but she moved on to other producers, and she has I've seen her live fairly recently, and she's definitely not lost any of her power or ability. She just keeps on going. But her albums certainly do not sound like the first one that I made. I'm not sure how she feels about that album, but I'm glad it exists. Anyone else? Hello.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
You are first.
So have you ever remixed a song of this era?
I have remixed a song. I think I've done remixes on my own stuff, but I also worked with a guy from London, I took it to Berlin to two of my really good, super incredible friends there, and we all three we ripped it apart. I played crazy synthesizer with it. My friend did lots of drum chopping. So yeah, I've done one really good remix.
Is it something we can find it?
Yeah, I believe so. That's a good question. It's called Arena of My Soul. The Berlin mix or something like that. Arena from the band is called El Hula. Yeah, Arena of My Soul Berlin mix or something like that. If you can't, contact me and I'll send you it. It's very good.
We have another question over there.
What were some of the other bands that you worked with in London in 2002?
Well, my favorite band that I worked with was a group called Kill Canada. I don't know if anyone ever heard of them, but I recorded like 2 albums, an EP and an album with them. They were just monstrous musicians. Yeah, they're from Bognor Regis. Hello. And they came to my studio in London, and we did many sessions. They're one of my favorite bands. I recorded John from the Libertines band, Yeti, they were called. I recorded Ian Astbury from The Cult. I recorded Skin from Skunk Anansie, her solo album, and lots of bands that were kind of around the scene that kind of aren't heard from right now. Yeah.
Oh, yes, we have time for the last question.
Last question already? Yeah. I don't want to go. I want to party with these guys more.
Just
Sorry.
gonna party.
Okay.
You like sampling?
Do I like I do. I got an incredible sampler. I started with Insonic Mirage, which was an 8-bit sampler. And then in the grunge 90s, I got this incredible one called ASR10, which was a 16-bit. It made CD quality samples. And I was really waiting for that because what I wanted to do was I had a collection of Mini Moogs, Jupiter, like all this old analog stuff, and I didn't want to take it on the road. And so as soon as I got the ASR10, I hooked up my Mini Moog into the input, and I played this note like, bwomp. Okay? I sampled it, and I played it back, and it was like, bwomp. I go, okay. Now I can do hundreds of synthesizer sounds at the same time, and I can take my 808, my 909, my Alesis drum machine, and my DMX, and make hundreds of samples of the drums in different ways with different reverb, and use them all at the same time. And then also I could take bits of dialogue from movies and slow it down in pitch, or make my own fake dialogue and slow it down so I sound like monsters or science fiction. And I spent basically a decade, the whole 90s, with my sampler. And I'm having that album come out very soon. It's called Lost Cities Lifetimes. It's all electronic music done with this sampler as the 8-track sequencer and the sampler. So yeah, I really like sampling. Yeah.
Very nice. A very quick nerdy question.
Please.
What's your best converters? What, like audio converters?
I really, really, really like those Avid 16 IOs.
Okay.
I use those for recording bands. You know, it just sounds incredibly good. It sounds a lot of impact, a lot of clarity, and it works really great with no latency and no other software to control. Like Pro Tools just talks to it. So you just plug something in, you set the level on the software, and that's the level it's going to stay until the mastering. You know, I love the Pro Tools I/O.
Well, thank you, Gordon, for this. We went to the last one. That was like basically the last question we have to finish.
Okay.
And then thank you very much for doing this tonight with us. And then thank you, guys, for this.
Yes, thanks for coming, and thank you for having me.